This is the Friday Rugby Preview on Borders Rugby Radio with Stuart Cameron.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Rugby Preview. On today's programme, we're going to hear from the Borders clubs that are playing tomorrow and hear what the coaches have to say about their matches in the Premiership Playoff Final, the National and the East Leagues as well. Dale Clancy is here as always, and we start obviously with one of our featured matches tomorrow, the Premiership Playoff Final. It's Hawick against Currie. It's happening at Mansfield Park, or at least we hope it is, because the weather is grim to say the least, but at the time we're recording this, every effort being made to get the match played and all the other games on the calendar tomorrow as well. But let's begin the programme by hearing from Matty Douglas, the head coach of Hawick, and his thoughts and team news ahead of the biggest game for his club in over 20 years.
Look, it's great to be able to associate Hawick with looking to win Premiership titles and reaching Premiership finals. It's, somewhere where I feel the club should be and need to be is at the top of club rugby. So look, in terms of that, massive well done to everybody involved. But look, the way it is at the minute, we now need to perform on Saturday again. And I think last week we got a lot of things right. I thought defensively is where we won it against Mar. I thought we just smothered them with ball and asked them to just keep playing. And look, in terms of that, really pleased. We brought a level of intensity that's probably just raised it to where it was all season. But on the flip side of attack and set piece, I know the players were a little bit frustrated. But look, we've trained exceptionally well this week just to fix those little things, and we're going to have to be at our best on Saturday. Currie are a team that we know well. We've already met twice this season, and look, kind of form goes out the window, I would say, in playoff rugby, and they'll be hurting for the last time they were at Mansfield. So we're expecting a big performance from them. Look, if they get their game management right and we let them play with a high tempo intensity to play it, then they're dangerous and they're tough to stop. So look, we need to match that. But for us, it's about being confident on Saturday. It's about dealing with the pressure again, dealing with the crowd. We've got home final. Hopefully, Mansfield's full again. That'll make a huge difference in trying to get the right result at the end of it. But look, we need to go to an intensity and kind of tempo that Currie need to get to, and if we can bring our defensive effort, we can set a platform from. So look, it's looking at it's got to be a massive battle come 3 o'clock. I think both teams, Currie will still be a bit hurting for last season. So look, we're in the position that they were last year, so we need to perform on Saturday. The players have got a massive opportunity to make some history at Hawick. It's been 22 years since we've won a title, and the players are aware of that, and we feel that we've worked extremely hard this season, and we've one more game to go, and we'll put our all into it, and we'll put every effort in to ensure that Premiership title stays at Mansfield on Saturday. So team news, no changes to report, same starting team and same bench for Saturday. We were really impressed with how well a few players went, and also how the bench came on and just aided in the intensity that we play at. So we're rewarding these players for Saturday. They know what to expect with the crowd, with the pressure this week. So it's a massive opportunity to write a bit of history for the club. So personally, I'm excited for it. I can't wait to get to Saturday. Club's worked extremely hard to try and ensure the game goes on by covering the pitch, so we're pretty hopeful that we've done enough, but only time will tell. But yeah, it's a massive game on Saturday, not just for the players but for the club, and definitely excited for it.
Matty Douglas, who's quietly and confidently steered his team to this moment all season, and now it's the time to deliver the goods.
Yeah, we spoke about it, over the last few weeks in terms of that Hawick have been the standout team in club rugby all season. They've, went about their business really efficiently, still unbeaten. They've only drawn that one game against Selkirk at the beginning of the season, but from them they've won every single game that came in front of them. And now this is the time where they can revel in that success if they get that victory. I think the Mar game did show the difference between league form and knockout competition, because it was a little bit more tetchy, but Hawick, from what I've seen of the game, never looked like they've really lost any control of it. They always looked like they were in charge of the game. Mar never looked really like they were going to threaten them too much, and it's going to be the same again, because Currie are a slightly different outfit than they were when they came down to Mansfield Park earlier in the season, and it's knockout rugby. And I think it's just going to be a really, really tight game, in the opening exchanges. I do feel that Hawick are definitely the stronger of the two squads. They're at home. I think there'll be a huge crowd there. I think it's going to be a really big occasion, in terms of the playoff final. Everybody's going to be wanting to go down and see who's going to be the victor for the Premiership. And Hawick, go in as favourites, but doesn't really matter. It's knockout rugby. It's a final, and it's going to be a huge, huge game on Saturday.
I was going to say, because Hawick have put 40 points on Currie in 2 games, 46 at Maleny Park and 40 odd at Mansfield Park. How much of that is going to be on the minds of the players? Are they going to think, we've beaten them twice quite comfortably, we're going to do it again? Or should they get that completely out of their mind and say, look, this is cup rugby, totally different?
Well, they have to get it completely out of their minds, but it's a difficult thing to try and get that mindset instilled in every single player, and that's Matty Douglas's job, and that's the captain's job, and the leadership group. But it's the same for Hawick as it is for Currie. It's probably relieved a lot of pressure from Currie because they've been howked on a couple of occasions this season. They were convincingly beat at home at Maleny, and then they were really heavily beaten at Mansfield Park as well. So almost, Currie have absolutely nothing to lose here. They didn't finish top of the pile. They've got through their semi-final against Edinburgh in relatively comfortable fashion as well. So they've got nothing to lose. It's the same scenario as we were in last year. Mar went about their business, got into a final, and they snatched it at the end in what was a great final. But, the pressure is on Hawick, and I hope the players are able to rise to that pressure and bring success, because it is such a huge, huge club, and to have not been in the mix for a Premiership crown, over the last 20 years is something they'll be looking to try and put right, and it's going to be a huge occasion.
In the midweek, it fell down to -8 degrees Celsius. The covers have been on, and I was talking to Matty in the midweek, and he said they've actually done the job. It was quite soft the day after, and they thank obviously Melrose for providing the covers, but a lot of effort by players and volunteers to go down there, and the club obviously want people to go down there early tomorrow morning to get those covers sorted out and the tyres off the pitch, etc. And it's great to see the community side coming into this as well.
Oh, definitely. I think one of them was actually Matty Carrier's sub-top, so he'll need that for Saturday, so they'll have to get that picked back up. But, it is great, and I think it's something I've always said about Hawick, as a rugby community in a town. Being the outsider, I'm envious of what they have. They've got just such a really good culture at that rugby club. Speaking to some people at work who have not been at a Hawick game maybe for the last 4, 5, 6 years, they're, what are you doing at the weekend? We're going down to the Premiership final. And that's just what Hawick does as a community, in terms of what they can do when they all gather together. It's brilliant, and I just think it'll be maybe not a sea of green. There'll be little bits of black and amber in there as well, but it will certainly be a really busy occasion with Hawick people getting down to back the home side.
And of course the community side as well. Graham Hogg, to name one of many people, and there's lots of others like Graham Hogg as well, but Graham has certainly stood out for me as going deep into the community, getting the youngsters involved as well. Lots of initiatives going on, and getting them to turn up tomorrow and enjoy the match, one of the biggest occasions this century for Hawick.
They've got a lot of players, and they've got ex-players, and they've got volunteers and committee members at that club that are Hawick through and through. So Graham's a player who I played against, and he was a great player when he was at Hawick, and obviously representing Scotland Sevens and whatnot. And he's got a lot still to give back. He's travelled away, learned a lot of other things outside of Hawick, and he's trying to bring the best parts of that back to the community. And it's great to have people like that, back at your club and serving the community again. The likes of Gary Muir as well, fulfilling his duties in the team. They've just got that culture, that community spirit that they all thrive off. And that's when Hawick are, for an opposition side, if this is a compliment by the way, that's when Hawick are at their worst, because when they're all bound together by that community spirit, they're a different beast.
Robin Purdy and Scott Tomlinson are our match commentators tomorrow on Borders Rugby Radio, but that's certainly not the only big game tomorrow. In fact, the much anticipated top of the table clash in National 1 between first place Kelso and second place Ayr, with just 1 point separating them, is taking place at Poynter Park. And let's hear from Kelso Director of Rugby, Neil Hinnigan.
Big game at Poynter on Saturday as we welcome Ayr, who are in second place, just a point behind us. After this match there will only be 2 games to go, so it's probably pretty vital who wins this one. We probably put their best foot forward, shall we say, so it's a massive game. We're coming off decent form. We've had a good run of wins. Disappointed last week with some of the performance at Watsonians. It wasn't just quite on quite on key that we wanted, but managed to get the win to keep the bandwagon rolling and get a chance at a big match now against Ayr. So yeah, we're working away quietly. Obviously, it's been a bit disruptive with some of the weather and whatnot this week. So we've had to change a few things up to make it work, and it's not ideal, but at the end of the day it's got to be done. So we've got a few changes. We've Murray Hastie returns to the starting lineup at 10, Liam Herdman moves to full back, and Greg Ponton moves to the wing. Cammy Brown drops out of the squad completely. In the forwards, Archie Cummins returns to the back row, meaning that Angus Common drops to the bench and Cammy Thompson moves up to the second row. Charlie Marshall is back in starting at hooker, with Hugh Knox going to the bench. Liam Tate returns to the bench as well. So a few changes, but still a pretty settled squad, muchness of what we've had most of the season. So there's not a great deal in it either way that the coaches decided to go with that. So it's obviously tactical for what we need this Saturday, and it's got to be a big game, big crowd again, and we're getting a little bit more used to these big crowds and big games. So hopefully another good day at the office at Poynter on Saturday, and then we'll see where we are come 5 o'clock. We'll know what we've got left to do from there and what needs to be done.
So Kelso looking for the double over Ayr, and earlier in the season Kelso were well adrift before staging a really good comeback.
Yeah, it's been an interesting league all season, the National One League, because it's been tight. There's been occasion when there's been 5 or 6 teams vying for promotion, and one by one they've all started to fall away. Gala, from the Borders point of view, were a team that fell away. Melrose, when they went down to Poynter Park, potentially you can say they've fallen away, and it's a 2-horse race now between Kelso and Ayr, and it's one of those that we spoke to Neil Hinnigan when we were down in Kelso, and they were explaining the game before when they went behind, and also when we were speaking after the game to Frankie Robson, he was explaining about when they went up to Millbrae, when they fell behind, when they were really, really struggling, they found a way to get back into it. It's one of these games that it's a final. They've got the final, the Premiership final at Mansfield. This is almost a final. If Kelso win, they've got that breathing space now. They've got a little bit of wiggle room to perhaps slip up on the way to promotion. If they lose, they're going to rely on other results to go their way, and they need some, big results to go their way if Ayr are going to be stopped. So it's a huge game. It's so unfortunate that we've got so many big games this weekend that you can't split yourself and watch them all. But it's certainly a huge game for Kelso, and I know I've said it about Hawick, but I think from a Borders point of view, I would love nothing more than seeing Kelso in the Premiership and fighting it out with Jed and Selkirk and Hawick next season.
And of course the same thing happened to Melrose, who were cruising against Ayr at the Greenyards, and then Ayr came back, and that never say die attitude. So they've had it done to them, but they've done it to Melrose.
Yeah, and I think Melrose have went on record as blaming Bruce Miller for that defeat, actually, because he did say that the game was home and hosed.
That's right.
And
Remember
I think
it.
There was a 12-point or a 13-point difference with a few minutes to go, and there was just something about Ayr, and I think that's interesting in the team selection as well, with the movement of Ponton, Hastie at fly half, and you've got Herdman at full back. They've got a lot of kicking options in the backs, so I do wonder whether they're going to try and make this a little bit of a tactical battle, try and pin this big Ayr pack back inside their own half and make them run from deep, because defensively Kelso have been really strong all season, so they back their defence. They know that they've got the defenders there to deal with big runners, and they've got the technique, but they'll be looking for the likes of Ponton, Herdman and Hastie to get them in the right positions in the park.
It's been really interesting seeing Ayr over the last few weeks. They went to GHK, they were behind. They went to Biggar, they were behind. They always find a way to win, and then go into fifth gear and get the tries as well. And also, again, the occasional surprise, Watsonians, they went to Marside. They were playing against 14 men for most of the match, over 60 minutes, I believe, and only won by 12 points to 10. So it's kind of which Ayr's going to turn up.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that, but you also look at those results and they won them. So I think winning it's a habit, and it's a really good habit to have, and Ayr have had it in abundance for years. Obviously now find themselves in that one because of other factors, but it's difficult to lose that habit and that culture in a team. That's why teams likes of Heriots at the time, if you're talking about Melrose, Heriots, Ayr, Boroughmuir to an extent as well, those sort of teams, they were always flying high in the Premiership because they've got that culture, and you can see in a lot of the squads they've still got them. Melrose, for example, have got a lot of the experience still in their team, which is helping that culture for the youngsters coming through. But Ayr as well, like say Pete McCallum playing at number 8 for Ayr, he's been a phenomenal player for the club over the years, and he's won everything there is to win in the club game, representing Scotland Club 15 as well, and now he's trying to get his home club back in the Premiership. So they've got that experience there, and that winning culture starts with guys like him.
And still 2 games to play after this weekend, which is very interesting because Kelso, they both have to go away from home. GHK will be the first visit for Kelso, and then Highland on the 3G pitch on April the 15th. Ayr have got Gallagher away, which obviously is going to be difficult for them, and Stumel away, which you would think they would be able to get some points on.
Yeah, I think the Stumel game, they'll be gutted they can only get 5 points because they have been very porous this season in terms of what they've presented to the other teams in the division, and they're slightly cut adrift at the bottom of the league, and obviously they're going to be going down into that too. But they're difficult fixtures. But again, in terms of National 1, being a rugby neutral, you've got a big game this weekend. Whatever way the game goes, you've got 2 difficult games still there. You've got 3 actually, because we're going to discard the Stumel one just now. But Ayr travelling to Gallagher is a difficult game for them. But even GHK and Highland for Kelso, you looked at Kelso away from home against Watsonians. It was so tight for so long, and eventually they pull away from from Watsonians last weekend to get that win. There could be similar situations in these last 2 games, but they might just not be able to pull away. So I think that highlights the importance of this weekend for Kelso. They need to get a win, I feel.
Well, also in National 1, it's Gallagher versus Melrose at Netherdale. Both have beaten each other convincingly this season. Melrose at the Greenyards and Gallagher in the Waverley Cup. So this one is for bragging rights. Let's hear from Melrose boss Bert Grigg and first Gallagher player coach Craig Dodds.
We take on Melrose this week, hoping that it can bring out another sort of big performance with us. We've had some good results over the last few weeks in terms of bonus points and tries scored and things like that, but we probably haven't played at our best. We'll certainly need to play at our best to beat Melrose. As always, it'll be a big occasion, so we'll be looking forward to it as a club. And like I say, hopefully we can get a win at home and keep sort of momentum going towards the end of the season and into the next in the sevens.
Yeah, obviously after a pretty disappointing performance, despite the result last Saturday, setting out into what's a pretty big game for us away at Gala. Looking forward to the challenge as always. We know what these border derbies can be like. Boys certainly bring their A game for it on both sides. So yeah, sure to be a good game, weather permitting. Few changes for us sees return of Angus Runciman into the pack. Kit Buchan drops out unfortunately. And then in the back line, Bruce Colvin's picked up a bit of a niggle. He's unavailable this week, but we see the return of Connor Spence onto the wing to give us a bit more physicality and size in that back line. But yeah, all in all, looking forward to a good game at Gala.
Always a big game between the two, and in normal circumstances, as I've said, that would be the big match of the day. But with massive games at Hawick and Kelso, it's the third billing this time round, with little at stake as far as the league is concerned. But no matter what the competition is, it's Gallagher against Melrose, always one of the big derbies.
A huge game for both sides, even though there's not a lot riding on it. It's still the derby. You could pretty much chuck a tennis ball between the 2 grounds. They're that close in proximity. So
you must have a good throwing hand in.
I've got one of those dog ball launchers. I was thinking with one of them. So, but in terms of the game itself it's interesting the way that it's panned out, because we were at the Greenyards for the first game and it was a convincing Melrose win. And a few weeks later in the Waverley Cup game, it completely flipped on its head, and there was no way I would ever have predicted that after watching the previous Gala performance. So, it's certainly a high aggregate score at the moment, but, both sides will be going out and looking to try and start building those foundations now for not just next season, but also getting a little bit of conditioning in the players, thinking about sevens, and Melrose have got that Border League final to aim for as well. So there's a lot in this game. There's a lot of different intricacies, and hopefully the game goes ahead. But we can look at it negatively because we want to see all these games. So it would be very convenient for us as rugby fans to have them all laid out nicely so we can catch them all. But how good is it that we've got 3 huge games for the Borders teams this weekend in terms of the national levels of rugby, because they're huge games for all the teams for different reasons, and certainly Gallagher versus Melrose is equally on that level.
Ewan Welsh will be covering that one for us tomorrow, and he has a habit of going to high-scoring games, so hopefully that will be another thriller between those two, and you can watch highlights on tomorrow night's programme. In National 2 tomorrow, Peebles will play host to Lasswade, and Berwick will be hoping that they can do them a favour by taking points off another team desperate to survive the 5-team drop. Let's hear from the head coach of Peebles, Ian Chisholm.
I think going by the weather forecast this weekend, we're pretty hopeful that this game's on. We do have a contingency plan if it isn't on that Lasswade, I think, have agreed to, whereas we'll play next Friday night. Really, we should be looking at these games when we're playing against teams in Midlothian on Friday nights and give boys an opportunity to extend their weekend a wee bit. Obviously disappointed with our first 20 minutes of our performance last week up at Falkirk, but really chuffed with the hour after that and how we reacted to being 31-0 down. The second 20 of the second half, we probed and we sort of found our way into the game and eventually got an upper hand. We were able to increase the ball and play a wee bit more. We covered the backfield much better and we made much better decisions around kick selection. So the second half there, we were much better, and the boys are in a much better fettle than I thought they would be. We had good numbers at training on Tuesday there, and we pretty much made the whole session around tactical games based around the themes that we want to see on Saturday. Defensively, going with the same principles, minus all the individual errors that we had at the weekend. But I'm pretty confident that we've got a good side coming out this weekend, and I'm pretty confident that the boys will be up for it, because we want to get our own back a wee bit here on Lasswade and Husey, because we felt going up to Lasswade early in the season that we should have taken a lot of points off them, and they were really clever with how they played. I think at one point they were down to 13 men. What they did from there was they kicked to the corner, they went to 4-man line out, they came off the top of that, and then played in the 15-metre channel until they got their 2 boys back, and that just frustrated us. We were impatient, but I think we're a better team now. We understand what we're trying to do tactically and technically now, and I think we're in a much better place and we're a much better team and we're making better decisions as a whole. So our squad to take on Lasswade, hopefully on Saturday, if not the Friday after. Neil Hogarth, club captain, he had a good game last weekend. He probably had his best game last weekend, and it's good to see him finally getting fit. He's needed game time, and he came to me and asked for game time, and he got it. And look, we're really chuffed at how he's progressing, and hopefully he can keep building into the end of the season at the sevens, which I know he wants to be involved in. John Napier keeps his place in at hooker. He's throwing really well at the moment, and his involvements are improving and increasing right the way throughout the park. Look, we have challenged him to get his hands on ball more, get himself into that inside clear and be brutal with his clear outs, and we're starting to see a bit of a change there. And Lewis Copeland starts at tight head, who, anyone that's been keeping track with how People's Rugby Club and their players are doing will know that Lewis Copeland started off the season in the second row, and then he moved to hooker, and he's bounced between them, and then he got an opportunity to play tight head, and he's actually thriving there. So again, similar to John Napier there, we're looking for Lewis to get his involvements up and increase his involvements in the game overall. I think his job on Saturday needs to be making sure that we be a real source of quick ball, whether that's him carrying or whether that's him holding defenders at the tip line, or whether he's winning the race to breakdowns and finishing them before they start, and just being brutal in general at the breakdown. And then he'll have a good game. Ross Brown returns to the squad alongside Sean Brotherston, and look, Ross will add a lot to us. He brings us a lot of direction, and his carries give us a lot of go forward. He does get a lot of yards after contact. So this is something that we'll be able to pull the trigger off, and I'm excited to see Ross back, as he does add that leadership element that we probably missed last week. And Sean Brotherston, he's probably nailed on for most improved player already. Just just the little things that he's doing, and he's sort of understanding that, you know, all the things that you don't have to be really, really talented for, he's just doing them really, really well. So he's winning races to breakdowns, he's chasing kicks. There was a moment last week where John Gray did a single man lift at the front of the line out, and they stole the ball, and he ended up and he worked his way up the pitch. And look, he's doing the basics really well as well. You know, one of his big issues was his hand-eye coordination and his ability to catch and maintain ball and be comfortable doing that while moving forward, putting in a bit of footwork and carrying into contact. And he's made it one of his strengths, and he's a good ball carrier now, and he's sticking all his tackles. So we're really chuffed to where Sean's getting to, and really looking forward to seeing the potential that he can get to over the next few seasons. In the back row, Finlay Collins drops out. He's got a bit of a stinger in his shoulder. We're not really sure what the problem is, but we're just going to give him a rest and have him back this week. We've got Murdo Anderson returned to the squad as well. Jay Coltman moves from the second row into the back row, and Kami Pai moves from the second row into the back row as well. Really chuffed to who all these players are bringing. And Murdo Anderson, he's just the improvement in him just around his run, catch, pass skills at the line have really impressed me, and I'm really hopeful that he'll keep playing for quite a wee while, because he's really developing into a quality player, as are Jay and Cammy. And Jay's involvements over the last 2 weeks have been really impressive. You know, he's an outstanding clearer of breakdowns, as is Cammy, and you know, we're pretty confident that we can win rucks with single men, single clearers when these guys are in support. At halfback, Jack Harrison moves from 12 into 9. Caelan McKeever, he's not done anything wrong. He's just been unable to train. You know, he's been doing us a favour, and he's been travelling to play games for us. However, we've not had Caelan at training, and while it's no ideal that he drops out, we do want to be able to run Tuesday, Thursdays with a 9 there. And look, Caelan understands that. At 10, Donald Anderson keeps his place. And in the centres, I'm really, really pleased to have Rob Harrison back. Rob brings a lot in terms of physicality, and he's really solid defensively, and he's adding bits to his game, and he's growing his game all the time, just around his decision making and his ability to move the ball. And I really like him as a centre, and I think the way he's going at the moment, he'll maybe end up staying there, but at some point in the game on Saturday, he will move into the back row to allow us to empty our bench and give the boys an opportunity to finish the game. James Dow keeps his place in at 13. So Scott Stoddart and Buster Davidson make up the wings, and Dave Collins returns from injury. He's been out for about 3 or 4 weeks now, and I'm really, really chuffed to see Dave back. He's like, if anyone kicks loose, then they're going to have problems if their kick chase isn't outstanding. So excited to see what these boys can do. On the bench, we have Willie Aitken, John Gray, Neil Pate and Caelan McKeever. And again, Neil Pate's a tough decision call for us. You know, he's not done anything wrong. We just feel that he'd be better finishing the game. Against Boroughmuir, for example, he wasn't overly involved in the first half, and then the second half came when the game opened up a wee bit, and he was able to get his hands on the ball a wee bit more. So looking for us to wear last way down, and then when the game does open up in that last 20 to half an hour, we're looking for Neil to do his stuff, and I know he can. So look, excited for the weekend again, as I always am, and I really hope that the weather holds for us so that we can play rugby, and then we can just treat the sevens as a seven and not have to worry about fighting on two fronts.
Well, we're beginning to run out of games now in the National League, getting very nervous for some teams, but no real pressure on Peebles. But remember, there's 5 go down and 6 go down in National 3. But with National 2, of course, you have Berwick in 5th place at the moment, which sounds nice and comfortable. But in fact, between 5th and 9th, there's only 2 or 3 points between them. So it really is nervous moments as we go to the end of the season. But Ian Chisholm there, fairly confident of a win, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of those games that you would say that Peebles do start as favourites. He's got a relatively strong squad as well, and you know he's taken that opportunity to bring some players back in and rest some players as well. You know, and really look at terms of the stock of players that he's got at his disposal, because obviously they're in the position where, unfortunately, in a league where there's a lot of relegation and there's a lot of movement, they're in the complete slap bang in the middle of they're probably not going to go up, and they're definitely not going to go down. So you know they're taking this opportunity to move some players around, but they would start it still as favourites. But Last Wade are still in the position that, you know, they're fighting just tucked in beside Berwick in terms of relegation. So there's so much still to fight for in that league in relegation. And I feel, you know, slightly different to to National 1, because the interest and the intrigue is really firmly fixed on how tight the promotion race is. In National 2, it's certainly looking at the relegation battle, because there's still 3 teams out of about 5 or 6 that could potentially go down.
And Berwick have to play Last Wade at home on the 15th of April, I think it is, isn't it? So lots of interesting games to go. And of course they've also got to play Glasgow Accies away from home and Newton Stuart at home, and they're in the top 3. So they're going to have to get some points against Preston Lodge. And let's hear from head coach Colin Young.
After the disappointment of last weekend, losing with the last kick of the game to Dumfries 13-11, we really need to get the points away from home this weekend to have any chance to stay in this league with the new structures going on. We didn't play well last weekend. For 75 minutes we were never really in the game, and probably didn't deserve to only be trailing by what we were going into the last minutes of the game. We managed to kick a penalty to put us into the lead, and then conceded a penalty the last play of the game. So discipline's got to be key this week away from home. The tales of last weekend, we took a bit of a battering where we've picked up 2 or 3 injuries this week, and bizarrely they're all hamstring tears. So Mason Emery and Rory Hindhoff will miss this weekend, and Ewan Thompson, we're waiting on a late fitness test from him. So we're pretty much unchanged, apart from them positions. On to Preston Lodge, we don't know much what they've been up to of late, but we just know that we must win this game on Saturday.
Well, as he mentioned, it was a very close game last week. 11 points to 10 they were leading, and then Dumfries took literally 3 points away from them. And, well, how crucial is that going to be? Yeah,
I think it is, a big 3 points to lose for Berwick, because we were just alluding on how tight that league is in terms of the teams that are round about them, especially that game against Last Wade. So, that could come back to bite them, but it allows them the opportunity on Saturday to go out and rectify that and try and make sure that they don't leave anything out in the pitch, because you feel that towards the end of the season now, it is crucial that you get points on the board. And you've already mentioned the 2 difficult games, Glasgow Accies and Newton Stuart, that they've got to try and get some points off of as well. And then they've got a big crunch match against Last Wade. So, against Preston Lodge, it's a really, really difficult place to go for Berwick. They'll be hoping that they can go away with something to try and rectify last weekend and slipping up and losing those 3 points.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we look ahead to sort of maybe 2 or 3 weeks in advance, and we're planning where we're going to go. And sometimes, we think, that's going to be a great match to cover. And then all of a sudden, a result or 2 results have conspired to put us in another direction. And at the moment, Berwick against Last Wade looks very, very tasty.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's sometimes the beauty of the league when you look at it. It can sometimes not tell the full story, because if you look at league standings, like Berwick, you're looking at them and you're thinking, they're pretty comfortable. If they can continue in that vein of form, they're probably going to be safe. But when you start looking at the fixtures and thinking that, this is the fixtures they've got coming up, it paints a completely different picture, and you start then looking at the teams round about them. Who have they got to play? Where are they going? Where are the points going to be won and lost? And you probably start looking at that Last Wade game. It would be, you don't want Berwick to be in that position at all. You don't want them to have to go down to that game to pick up something. But if they do, if it's a rugby neutral again, it's a great game to try and take in, because it's winner takes all. It could be who's going up, who's going to stay in this division, and who's going to go down. And again, it's the intrigue of the reshuffling of the leagues. But there's been very little games throughout the season that have meant nothing. Everything's had a little bit riding on it. So it's certainly going to be a really interesting time for Berwick Rugby Club in their return back to kind of National 2.
And of course, that's the day before their own Berwick Sevens as well, just to add that into the mix. And of course, the day that Kelso might have to go up to Highland to get the result to get promotion. Don't know. We could be at Berwick, we could be at Highland, we could be back in the borders.
Yeah, it could be England, or it could be the north of Scotland. So it's going to be interesting, but it's great. It's great to go around and support these teams, and obviously we've got the border slanting it, and we want them all to be successful. But without the teams that they're playing and the other teams around in Scottish rugby, we wouldn't have the wonderful game that we do. So it's great to be able to go to these places and cover the games.
Well, no East 1 or 2 matches involving local teams this weekend, but all 3 are in action, weather permitting, in East League 3, and all are away from home. Let's start with Hawick Harlequins, who travel to play Edinburgh University Medics at Peffer Mill. The only team, of course, to beat them this season when they took the East Bowl final, but Quins still unbeaten in the league, and here's captain Adam Hall.
We're expecting another tough game up in Edinburgh this weekend. The Medics have some mixed form this season, but we have to assume they're going to be at their best, and if they are, then we're going to have to put in a performance to keep our unbeaten league run going. They are the only team to beat us this season up at Peffer Mill in the East Bowl final. It was a tough game there, it could have gone either way, but we're hoping to come out on the right side of the result this time and keep the league run going.
Adam Hall will also in East 3. Gallagher IM travel to take on Inverleith, and we hear now from player coach Stuart Walker.
Last weekend was another huge step forward for us with a really solid win against Trinity at home. We dominated in the first half, and we did change a lot come the second half, and that did cause a wee bit of disruption, but overall I was delighted with the way that we played. Looking forward to this weekend against Inverleith. We had a really decent win against them at home, so we're just looking to back that up with a similar performance away. We've got a strong squad going up, and we're feeling really positive, although the way the forecast is looking is obviously a bit touch and go as to whether it'll be on, but fingers crossed it is, and we'll hopefully get another good win to keep the momentum going.
Stuart Walker. Earlston are the other team in action from the Borders in East 3, and they had a fine result last week, so delighted for them. They travel to Bangham to play Trinity Accies, and their captain is Aaron Patterson.
Coming off a high for last week against Uni Medics, we're going to take everything we've done there into this game this weekend, as I say, if it goes ahead. Boys are just as excited about it. We've got a good chance to consolidate on last week's performance, and that's really what we want to be doing. This week it's definitely a winnable game for us, and we're definitely targeting it. Last game of the season, so we're all looking to put in maximum effort and really go for it, and then enjoy going into sevens and feeling unfit again.
Aaron Patterson, and we wish Earlston all the best in their final game. Well, before we go tonight, a highly entertaining interview to bring you with Richard Brown, Richie Gray and Pete Gallagher, who were all part of the Scottish school squad who toured New Zealand back in 1988. Richie and Richard were teenagers playing at the time, and one of the coaches was Pete Gallagher. Another member of the team was Doddie Weir, and as a tribute to Doddie, many of that squad have reunited and will be doing their bit to raise money for Doddie's MND charity. They came into the studio earlier this week, and there was plenty of laughter as they recalled that tour. Lots of great anecdotes, but first a word from Richard Brown on what they have planned.
Our captain of the tour, Gary Kennard, got in touch not long after Doddie passed and got a group together and decided we should do something. He meant a lot to us on that tour, and it's amazing how it's snowballed with guys coming from all over the world to take part.
And they literally are.
Well, they are. We've got guys coming in from Australia, Canada, Singapore, Gibraltar, France, Buzzles,
Duns and Gala.
And you've got plenty of good weather to look forward to.
Well, the worry is we've got a cycle next Thursday all day from the Carter Bar, which is quite special. As we know, Doddie got engaged there to Cathay, so we start there and we make our way back to Melrose throughout the day. We do have a little pint and a bowl of soup stop at Ancram. I'm worried about getting them back out on the bikes after that. And we do that all day Thursday, and then Friday we are hiking over the Pentlands into Edinburgh. The worry is the forecast's looking a little bit iffy at the moment.
It certainly is, isn't it? And we were talking about 88 grand is what your target is, and I think you're well on your way at the moment. It's up to 20, isn't it?
Yeah, I think 88 grand was quite aspirational, but we'll keep pushing for it, and there's a lot of fundraising to come. I think by the time we get involved on the 2 days and at Murrayfield for the Italy game, hopefully we'll get a boost. But it's been amazing how it's come in. It sort of plateaued at 12 for a couple of weeks, and then just since the press releases by the Foundation and the SRU last week, we've jumped another £5,000-6,000, so delighted.
But how did you get these guys together? I mean, there's about 22 of the 25 or so players are going to be taking part in this. 2 sadly are no longer with us, but I mean, that's a hell of an effort. You've obviously kept in touch since those days, 35 years ago.
Well, it's going to be interesting for me because most of them I haven't seen since they were stick insects at 18 years old. And all these years later, I think it will be difficult to recognise some of them, because I'm sure the shapes will have changed a bit. But the characters and the banter that's going on already on the WhatsApp group shows that the camaraderie is still there that was built up in 1988, and it's amazing to the response that there's been to this, and they're all desperately keen to come and meet up. And the stories will get exaggerated, of course, and it'll be interesting, really interesting.
Now, Pete, you obviously were in charge of the coaching with Rob Moffat back then. It was very young Rob Moffat, I would imagine, then, 35 years ago. So
you would hardly recognise him. He had a little moustache then, and he had a lot of hair.
Oh, I remember the moustache and all the video.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how did you control, I mean, Doddie, Weir, Richie Gray, characters like that? I mean, extraordinary times and some great memories.
Oh, yeah. Well, it wasn't easy, obviously, because they were characters, but the other side of the coin was that they were desperately keen on their rugby. And so it wasn't too difficult to marry the two elements, that they wanted to be themselves and have a lot of fun, which was great, but they also wanted to concentrate on the rugby. And we knew it was going to be a very tough tour. And so it was easier for Rob and I to motivate these guys and to get them interested, and at the same time to let them have the fun that everybody wanted to have.
Now, Richie Gray here, the collision king himself. Back then, of course, let's just say it was a bit of a rough and tough tour.
Yeah, it was, and in some ways, and this is where I look at youngsters now that are playing the game, and don't get me wrong, the game's changed a huge amount since 1988, but we were still then, allowed to ruck, for example.
And
so
we're talking real rucking.
So you were talking 8 people going in over the top of who was ever on the ground, and it was just, that's what you did. And we were just speaking off air here that in the first game against Hannon Shield Schools, which I think are now South Canterbury, that's what they'd be called now, I can remember myself and Doddie deciding, right, listen, we're going to go for this, in a big way, and we went to this local sports shop and we bought these studs that must have been about 28-30 mil long, and we had the washers on to get everything sorted. So myself and Doddie decided that we'll take it upon ourselves to go for it, and I can remember afterwards we got beat in our first game, which was a real shocker, but they were going to send us home because of over vigorous play, and there was a legendary administrator called Archie McIntyre who came from Morrison's Academy, very old school, I would think ex-RAF, great man, but just couldn't handle this, And I remember myself and Doddie got brought into the office, and you've let your families down, you've let yourselves down, the country down. We're seriously thinking of sending you home, and we're thinking, oh no, what have we done here?
After 4 days.
Yeah, after 4 days, but I think it was just to try to lay a marker down that, guys, we've got to. But, credit to Peter and Rob, within a matter of about, I would say, 7 to 14 days, because, as Peter said, we were keen, we loved our rugby, we just wanted to learn. Going to New Zealand, it was just after the first World Cup as well, which was just, the place was oozing rugby, You just had to get better. And we did, and we actually went on to have an incredibly successful tour, beat some big teams, and we just got better, And it's always lived with me, because you've gone on to coach, that there were certain things we did on that tour are still absolutely important in today's game. One of them's body height, and being able to be in control of your body, especially now when you're looking at the high tackle frameworks and you're looking at breakdown laws and whatever. It's still incredibly important on how we were trained. So Peter and Rob did a good job in getting a group of boys shipped into shape from all over Scotland.
Now, Richard, this was a real learning experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough, as Richie said, and the body height and the physicality around the breakdown was something that we'd probably never experienced before. However, front row, we actually had the edge most often in the front row, because they had very strict rules about how far they could push scrums, while we didn't at that stage at under 18 rugby. So we were quite used to putting an extended shove on, and we did well scrummaging. We struggled elsewhere, but we did well scrummaging. But my memory from that tour was the border representation, which we probably don't see as often now, given the age group rugby is quite dominated by the private school system. We had, 6 Melrose Colts on that tour. We had Richie from Gallagher, we had a couple of Selkirk boys and a couple of Duns boys. So that's quite a huge representation from the area. And obviously both coaches were based in the Borders. So that's probably unusual compared to nowadays.
Pete, I mean, health and safety out the window completely back then. It was like 35 years ago. Different ballgame completely.
Oh, absolutely different ball game, and Richie's alluded to it, that the rucking had to be fierce rucking, because we knew from the reports that we got back from New Zealand that it was going to be very, very physical, and Rob and I weren't convinced that these guys were really aware of how physical it was going to be. So the legendary couple of weeks before we went away on the back pitch at Murrayfield, we said to them, right, this is going to be a sample of what you're going to experience out there. Go and play for half an hour on that back pitch amongst yourselves with no rules whatsoever. No rules at all. You can do whatever you like. You can make it as physical as you like, because this is what you're going to experience. Eventually,
I said to Peter, it was the best half an hour of my career, my whole career.
And eventually it got so physical that the doc intervened and said, look, you'll need to stop, or we're going to have nobody left to go to New Zealand. And we thought we'd given that sort of physicality, but again, as Richie alluded to, the very first game, we didn't know what had hit us. But fortunately, they were very keen to help us. And the very next day, when we got out there, a Sunday morning, with a priest with his collar on. I think he'd been to the church at 7 so that he could be with us at 10. And he gave us a service on Sunday morning of how to ruck, and basically body height.
Yeah.
And I can recall there was a couple of pads and had big thick ropes round them at a certain height, and he told the boys, right, you just drive on these pads. Well, initially they were coming up with torn ears and blood across their forehead and everything, because they weren't getting low enough. And they soon learned that if you didn't get low, you're going to be in the hospital getting stitched up. So the body height became better and better and better. And that was an area that we really concentrated on for the remainder of the tour, and it paid huge dividends.
Well, Richie, I mean, what a learning experience for any kids, going out there, going to New Zealand, spending weeks on end there, playing rugby, learning life skills as well, and coming out the other side.
Yeah, it's just, I always think, we were so lucky because we were still in the amateur era then, and, the game's changed beyond all recognition now, but from a personal point of view, we're just so happy to have gone through that, because you can still understand what the amateur ideal was and what you had to do. And I suppose now in professional rugby we're trying so hard to try and keep parts of that, and it's very, very difficult because it's a totally different sport. But the bottom line is, it's taken a group of players away from all different areas of the country, different schools. You had your Merkistons to Gal Academies to Selkirk High Schools to Earlstons to Golspie up in the north, and you brought all these boys together and off you went, and we had a phenomenal kind of culture in the place. And I always laugh because you read about these books of culture and developing culture, and you just develop culture through honesty, hard work and good people, and we're lucky that we were well led with Peter and Rob, and also Ian Lobin, the old president, who's sadly not with us anymore, Archie McIntyre, who's not with us anymore, Dr. Ian Adam from Stuart's Melville. They were just good people, and we just had a phenomenal time. And I think that's why so many boys have made the effort to come back from all over the world to cycle, to walk, and then to walk into Murrayfield, a week on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think it's not just a celebration of Doddie. We lost another friend from that tour, far too young, a young 10 who often kept Graham Shield out of the team. So that's how good he was. A chap called Gary Sisman, who died in an air accident in Africa when he was only 21, 22. So the guys have been talking about that a lot as well over the last couple of weeks on our WhatsApp channel. So I think bringing everyone together is going to be amazing, and we'll create more memories.
And I mean, what a squad as well. I mean, you had Andy Nicol and Scott Nicol and Graham Shield, you mentioned, and a few others as well, who went on to win considerable amount of caps for Scotland.
Yeah, I think it was a very good outcome from the tour, and I think what a tour like that did, because we'd never done anything like that before, what it did was it accelerated the development of the players, to the extent that Doddie and Andy Nicol and Graham Shield and Scott Nicol and so on got capped probably earlier than they might have done if they had been around tours in Scotland or whatever. I'm pretty sure that tour accelerated the development of these youngsters to get international caps earlier in their life.
Most of those players, Stuart, also went on to play district rugby, so most of them all played South, Glasgow, Edinburgh, North and Midlands. I remember we all met up again on the Scottish Students World Cup in 1992. There was a huge group of the same squad, so it was good to see everybody coming through. And that was when club rugby, there was no pro rugby then. The Reivers in Edinburgh, Glasgow hadn't started, so when we all came out of that tour, we automatically played against each other. Gary Kennard, our captain, played for Heriots along with Stuart Paul. You had Fred here played for Melrose. I was playing for Gala, so you went on this tour of a great bond, and then 6 months later we were all in our senior teams very quickly, actually, because we were only 18 years old.
Probably too quickly.
Yeah,
for
possibly
some.
knocking the 10 bells out of each other,
My first game for Melrose was against Jerry McGuinness at Hawick, and that was a bit of an unfair competition.
But I mean, these tours, there's not enough of it today, is there, really? I mean, these are experiences that boys should have. And I know some of them, they get on scholarships and they go out to New Zealand. There's some away at the moment in South Africa and places like that. But collectively, as a kind of Scottish schools, that doesn't really happen, does it?
It doesn't happen now, and it is a shame, because we've talked about it before, but there was a kind of cultural element to it as well. These guys had the privilege of going to stay with New Zealand families and be part of the culture of the family, and they've kept links up with these families all these years later. In fact, some of the families came across here to watch them play that they'd stayed with in New Zealand. So when you tour now, that element is gone. It's very much the team goes into a hotel, the team goes to training, team plays, the team comes back. Now you still build up a bit of a bond, but nothing like the relationships that were established in that kind of tour.
Because it was all inclusive, wasn't it?
It was totally inclusive. We stayed with some real characters in the families, and we still talk about them yet. And that was a big part. And the families, New Zealand families, came to support the Scottish boys when we played against New Zealand teams. So that bond became really strong, and that's an element now that's completely gone. Health and safety and all these different things now doesn't allow that to happen, which is a shame.
Now, Richard, this challenge that you're doing, it's a mixture of walking, cycling as well, and obviously raising money as well. But I mean, more than that, you're just getting all the boys, getting the band back together again, almost, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we've got, in addition to the challenge itself, we've got a few social events, as you can imagine, around that. So we start on next Thursday at the Carter Bar. We cycle to Melrose. We have a private dinner in the restaurant at Burt's on Thursday night. We then have a very early start on Friday, which might be challenging depending how the Thursday night goes. And then after our walk, once we get to Edinburgh, we have another dinner at the Scottish Malt Whisky Society. So I think that's allowed when you get to a certain age.
Absolutely. And I have to ask you if your favourite Doddie story. Start with you, Richard.
My favourite Doddie story is actually pre-Scottish schools. It's back when we were playing at Melrose in the age group, and it was a tournament in France, in Orthez in France. Stirling County were there. I think maybe Kelso were there. We were there. And Doddie, we played against French teams, and they didn't like the rucking at all. And then I remember playing against a Spanish side who were just dirty, and they spat on the front row as we were going down to scrum. And the next thing I knew, Doddie's huge arm, came from behind and walloped the boy. And that was it. It just set the tone for the day, and that was one of my earliest and favourite memories of Doddie.
Peter?
Mine is probably, staying on the tour theme. I recall, and I was just reminding Richie of this because he was part of it as well, but on an internal flight in New Zealand, I mean, Doddie was always life and soul of the party anyway on the tour, even at 18 years old. But we got on the internal flight. The flight had just reached cruising height when Doddie and his pal Richie here got up and took over. They got the hats off the air hostesses, and they took over running the plane between I think it was, I don't know whether it was Christchurch and up to Auckland.
We ended up in Samoa.
And those were the days when you couldn't lock the pilot away, so he was a bit worried as well because the door kept opening. These two guys were just trying to get in, and I can remember somebody shouting, "Richie, don't touch any buttons. Doddie, don't touch any buttons in the cockpit." So yeah, I mean, and the good thing was all the passengers and the crew bought into it as as well, and it was a great fun flight, and that summed up Doddie really. You know, you just never knew what was going to happen next, but it was always fun, real fun, and it didn't offend anybody. Everybody just joined in.
Yeah, Richie Gray Airlines, another business for you there.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got a lot of stories.
I bet you have.
A lot I possibly can't repeat. But I remember, just to go back to when we were 18. I was meant to get my first cap against England up in Glasgow, and I broke my coccyx bone in the bottom of my back on the Thursday, so I couldn't play, and that was it. And it was the night of the Melrose Sevens. We'd played England, wasn't a great result for Scottish schools. And the English team, you had Martin Johnson and I remember Adebayo on the wing. These guys,
Steve Ojomo,
Steve
Nick
Ojomo.
Beale.
It was a quality English team. So anyway, Doddie had this old Datsun Stanza that he would drive around the borders at about 120 mile an hour, and the back seat was changed for him so he could keep his legs at the length. But we went flying down the road because there was a disco, obviously, at Melrose Sevens. We wanted to get back down there as quick as we could, so we went in by Cortle Ferry Farm. Doddie said, I'm just going to get changed and get the gear on for the Saturday night. So he came out with white trousers and a white shirt and a pair of black shoes, right? The good old all in white. And I'm thinking, geez, when all of a sudden Jock for the shed, the cow shed, says, listen, we're about to calf and I need a hand, right? So anyway, Doddie says, right, we'll keep the car running. So I'm standing at the side here because obviously I'm a city boy for Gala. I'd never seen this happen before. And Doddie is literally arm deep into this thing, helping the father. Obviously the calf's born, fantastic. There's blood everywhere, and I imagine he's dressed in a white. I said, you better get yourself changed. No, we'll be okay. Went into the kitchen, washed his hand off in the dishes, right, that were in the kitchen, got literally into the car, drove down to Melrose. We got back there about 8, 9 o'clock at night. Disco just started. It looked like there had been a murder, right? And he didn't bother a jot, right? That was it. And obviously had a good night, and we've even met up with Fred and the boys, and they came back down. But that sums him up. But for me, Doddie Weir, sadly passed away, but he has left an incredible legacy.
Everyone's got a story about him.
Well, he has, and also I think there was a lot more to it than just raising money. And we used to discuss this a lot. And I know Fred, and we've always been up and down to the farm to see him over the years. And there's just so much more to it than raising money for MND. There's part of it, a huge part of it, is actually doing exactly what we're doing next Thursday, Friday, Saturday, is bringing people together again. And life's too short not to catch up, pick up a phone, go a walk with somebody that you haven't seen for 10 or 15 years. And for me, there's a sort of hidden agenda, I think, behind what he did. One was raising money for MND, and let's hope we find a cure. But the other one was bringing people together, especially in rugby. Let's be a little bit one-eyed for a minute on teams that you've played for, players you've played against, coaches you've been coached by, just keeping us all together, connecting you all. And we've sat for about 2 hours before we've done this interview. We could have spoken for another 4 or 5.
If only we'd recorded it.
Yeah, I know. I'm maybe glad you didn't. So, there'll be a few beeps in there. But, that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about bringing us all together. And sometimes life's too short not to pick up a phone and say, hey, let's go out for a coffee, or let's go out for a couple of beers. And that's the key. And I think he'll be smiling on us, because I just know fine well that that's deep down what he wanted.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely amazed that they managed to track you down, because sometimes you're in Fiji, sometimes you're in France, you're here, everywhere.
I'm in France at the moment, so I got back on Sunday. So
what's your current situation? Because you obviously resigned from Fiji because Vern Cotter resigned, and you're very loyal in that way, you've always said.
You always have to do that. So if your head coach goes and the coach that's asked you to come in, then you must go too. I've always been like that, and I've done that in South Africa, Scotland when Vern left, and Fiji. So VC's on his farm in New Zealand. Funnily enough, we've been talking about New Zealand. I'm still with Toulon, so I'll be kind of pretty much focused on Toulon from now until the end of the season, and that's key for me. And then I'm back to America and American football as well. So I'm busy. So there's enough to keep me going, Stuart. Don't worry.
Any other inventions?
There's always other things coming about. Yeah, there's one coming out shortly. Actually, it'll be a good one.
What can you tell us about that?
It's about rucking.
Rucking. What a surprise!
That takes us right back to this New Zealand tour. That's where it all started.
It certainly did. Now, Pete, what are you doing these days? I mean, you'll never retire. I mean, you're coming up for 80, if you don't mind me saying, and you're looking as fit as the other two. I can have to, and me certainly.
It's a Dunn's water, I think. There's something going on in Dunn's.
It's something to do with the air in Dunn's, right enough. No, I mean, I should really be stepping back a bit at my age, but like these guys, I still enjoy it a lot. And the last thing I want to do is just sit back and put my feet up. So I'm trying to step back a bit, but I'm still drip feeding odds and ends into particularly the Colts. I'm focusing more on the 16s and the Colts as they come through, and I can add my tuppence worth there, but at the same time I'm trying to make sure that other coaches are developing and they can take over. And my wife, I'm not sure whether she'll be delighted if I step back or whether she's had 50 plus years of me being involved, and if I step back then that'll upset the whole rhythm of the last 50 years, so I'll maybe have to keep going for a wee bit longer.
And Richie, what did your father say about chairs?
My old father, yeah, it's funny, like, because Peter and my father played against each other, because my father's 82 and, you know, Peter's 80, so, you know, they know each other well and possibly knocked 10 bells at each other for many a year.
We did.
Yeah, my father's got a great saying. He says there's two chairs will kill you, the electric chair and the armchair. So you got to keep going, you know, in whatever you're doing, just make sure that you're always keeping yourself busy, active, your mind's always, you know, working. The minute you sit down and start looking at the television, it's all over, isn't it?
Yeah. And Richard, what about you? What are you up to?
I'm very much focused on my business career, so I'm a director with a technology services company. But I stay connected to rugby. I was on the board at Melrose recently, and I coached the juniors at Melrose for the last 10, 15 years, just stepping away over the last 2. So the good thing is there's 3 more Doddies in the pipeline, and they all have the same attitude when it comes to rugby. So yeah, I think there's great hope in that.
Fantastic. And just finally, of course, tell us how people can donate to this cause.
Yeah, so we've got a Just Giving page. The easiest way to find it is just go onto Just Giving and search for Doddie 88, and you'll see we've got a number of updates there. There's some fantastic old photos from the tour, and it tells the story about what we're doing and why and who the characters are. And we're just grateful for anyone that can spare a few pounds and add to our total.
Well, it's a fantastic thing that you're doing, of course, and it's great to see just 3 of the many. I just can't imagine what it's going to be like on Thursday when you all get together. Mayhem completely. But great to see you, Richard, and Pete, and obviously Richie Gray as well, and all the best of luck with it. Very entertaining interview. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm sure you did. But that's it for today. We're here tomorrow at 2 o'clock for Borders Rugby Special. It's Hawick versus Currie in the Premiership Final. It's our featured commentary match, so hope you can join us for that, plus all the score updates as they happen, and coverage of Kelso's vital National 1 top-of-the-table game against Ayr. As always, to tune in, just go to our homepage at bordersrugby.net and press the Listen Live button. Thanks for listening tonight, and from Dale and I, bye for now.